Have you ever thought of starting something new, maybe a YouTube channel or another creative project, but then felt completely paralyzed because you couldn't do it perfectly from the start? You picture the ideal final product in your head. Maybe it's a very high quality video with confident delivery and polished editing, but then reality hits. You don't know how to do all those things just yet, and only the thought of the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels extremely overwhelming. So you put that idea off again and again. If that sounds familiar, I totally get it. This is Serena or just Sere, and in today's video, I want to share with you my own struggles with perfectionism, how it stopped me for so long from starting this channel, and what eventually had me break through. So I've always been quite of a perfectionist. I love quality work, quality output, and I don't deal well with mediocrity. And while I can be very encouraging and kind towards others, I am unbelievably harsh on myself. When you think like that, starting something new feels completely terrifying. If you are anything like me, you don't want just to start. You want to start with the very high standards that you have for yourselves. And honestly, when you're starting something new, it's pretty hard to get to the standards. In the best case scenario, you will not be happy with the result. It will not be good enough. At worst, you will never start. That is exactly what happened to me with so many ideas, but especially with this YouTube channel. I would picture the perfect product in my mind, and that vision was so overwhelming that I would completely shut down. I would get stuck into thinking about all the things that I didn't know how to do, making it feel quite impossible to just begin. And we often hear more expert YouTubers saying, don't care about what other people think. No one is ever going to watch. Just start. But honestly, for me, when I had to start, I was not scared about others' people judgment, but I was extremely scared of having to deal with my inner critique. But at some point, I started to realize that the pain of not starting something that I really wanted to explore was as bad as the fear of having to confront something new. I realized that I was procrastinating not because I was lazy. I was procrastinating because of perfectionism, because I was scared. And honestly, I didn't really like that idea. That's when I started to think about a book I read a few years ago. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection from Brené Brown. If you don't know Brené's work, I would strongly encourage you to explore it. And especially if you're a perfectionist like me, you might want to read this book. It's been out for a while, but it's an evergreen, and I think it's really worth the read. And Brené has this very beautiful way of unpacking the underlying causes of perfectionism. And basically, she explains that perfectionism is really not trying to do your best, but it's a sort of shield that you think will protect you from blame, shame, and judgment. So you try to act perfectly, you want to live perfectly because you're trying to protect yourself. And this really struck with me. And when I think about especially the judgment part, for me, it's again not really judgment by other people. Obviously, I will somewhat concerned about what other people think, but it's really about having to deal with my inner critique, which can be very harsh at times. So this really hit me hard, that perfectionism is about fear, the fear of making mistakes, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of being seen as a beginner. I didn't really want to be conquered by fear. So I decided to just start. I knew that if I was waiting for the time I would feel ready, I would never start at all. So again, Brené Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. So this is what I decided. I decided to acknowledge my inner critique. I have to admit that having high standards and striving for close to perfect has served me throughout my life. But most of the times really prevented me from starting new things and experimenting with new things. So I've decided to acknowledge my inner critique, but also give space to a more bold version of me, a braver version of me. Uh, I want to give space to that part of me that wants to experiment. And when you want to experiment, you have to be a beginner. You have to go through mistakes. There's no way around it. So I'm very in peace with the idea that my first experiments will not be um, as good as I would like them to be. but I'm conscious that this is a process, and hopefully in a few months from now, I will look at these videos extremely happy because I will have made progress along the way. So if you're also a world-class procrastinator and perfectionist and you want to see how this experiment plays out for me, hit that subscribe button and follow my journey. And that's it for today. I'll see you next week with a new video. Ciao.